Peter.
Hello.
First question. What was the catalyst in your life to get you to downtown Vegas?
So if you work with cities on how do you engage citizen in creation of cities and in developing them, this project stands as one of the most interesting examples out there. So having been working with London and San Francisco and Singapore, and then looking over here, it's like, what's going on there? It was kind of, I have to come out here and see what's going on.
Great. And you're a big data person, so your mind's probably like running a mile a minute on all of this information that you're consuming here. What are you going to take back from this experience specifically to be able to apply to what you're doing in all of these other communities?
Well, first of all, I should tell you, this summer, I went off to Paris as a guest of the French government. We did a Smart Cities tour of France. Clearly coming here is a more foreign thing because France, Paris, is like, that's another big city doing big city things, and they're iterating off of what big cities do. This is kind of a whole new deal in the sense of, let's take a part of town and simultaneously figure out how to drive entrepreneurism there, but the entrepreneurism has to have a return on community, which is a really big idea because the tech community, for example, in San Francisco is now getting yelled at because it doesn't seem that community-minded. And what would it look like if your startups were, and you're kind of working on that. And then it's, well, let's make a city we could learn from. It would make you smarter, which is really clever because like they're smart cities, but I hadn't thought of the city would make you smarter. Usually it's like all the smart data stuff. So, you know, and then there's just the scale of the investment. And the other interesting thing is, this is kind of a perfect place to do this kind of experiment because of its relationship to government and the other citizens. It reminds me of the solar system. You know, you have to stick Earth in just the right place for there to be life. If you're too close to the sun, you burn up, and if you're too far out, it doesn't work. I think if you tried to do the downtown project in a crowded place like San Francisco or New York, all of the neighbors and all the permitting and all the zoning, you wouldn't be left alone. And if you tried to do it in some place that was a lot more difficult to go do it in, you wouldn't have that critical mass. So this is a perfect place for that experiment. So I think there's a lot we can take away from this in terms of how do you speed up development, how do you do prototypes quickly. The pace at which things get done here, I think China's the only other place that does that. And that's a really interesting thing to learn from.
Great. And what has been the most inspiring experience from Catalyst Week that you're going to take from here? Not necessarily data, but more, as we learned today, the elephant. What has ignited the elephant in you?
Right. Well, so first of all, we're only one day into it, so there's probably a lot of elephant to come. I mean, broadly, I'm inspired by the number of simultaneous things that are going on to essentially shock a system into being and making all that kind of stuff work, and the speed with which you go from an idea to an implementation. Because I don't think we normally see that. You know, we kind of have a set way of viewing things. Going to the Zappos meeting today is a really interesting, boy, talk about culture. I mean, that's a very rich dose of culture. You know, there's this tradition in American cities of company towns. You know, IBM had company towns. We had this early in the century. And then kind of we lost community in our nation. I mean, we've gone through a bit of a community crisis. We're yearning for community, and we have a generation of younger people who get married later and who are more single and who live in cities. So how do you recapture community in cities is actually a big issue. It's the reason people care about Burning Man. It's the reason people are moving to cities. So this is a really interesting experiment in that. And there's just a lot of data points. I mean, anthropologists would have a field day coming out here.
You're still inspired. The elephant in you is still inspired by the rider. I like it.
Yeah. No, this is someone's asked me what I thought, and it's like, well, I'm still in input mode. We'll worry about that later. But I think it's a very rich case, and somewhat misunderstood, because you know you're in that phase where you're doing so much that you know, like Tony's out giving speeches, but really people don't really know that story. You kind of have to experience. After all, who comes to Las Vegas for the community? I mean, it's like, that's an interesting trip, but actually, personally, that's the most fulfilling way to come. My normal relationship to Vegas is, oh my God, I have to go to Vegas, there's a big trade show, it's going to be awful. And then, hey, here's a really cool group of people working on something. So that's probably the biggest thing. It has repositioned it in my mind because there's a group of people doing something really, really interesting, and they're committed, and they're just in a weird enough environment that it forces them to hang together as a community.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Perfect.